No one believed it. Keanu and Sandra appeared as a couple at the party. The night was filled with lights, music, and whispers. The grand ballroom was alive with movement, men in crisp suits, women in shining dresses, and everyone waiting for the moment that would be remembered for years. No one expected what was about to happen. As the doors opened, heads turned quickly. People gasped softly. Others leaned closer to one another, unsure if their eyes were playing tricks. Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock walked in together, side by side, calm yet connected in a way that made the whole hall freeze. For years there had been rumors, little sparks of curiosity, but never something like this. The two of them walked with quiet grace, and for the first time that evening, the laughter and chatter in the room stopped completely. Some smiled, thinking this was just a friendly appearance, but others stared longer, noticing the small things. Keanu's hand resting gently near Sandra's back as if guiding her, the way her eyes softened when he whispered something, and the unspoken rhythm between them that only two people who trusted each other deeply could share. The party was meant to honor a successful film release with directors, producers, and celebrities from around the world. But in just those few steps, Keanu and Sandra changed the entire focus. People forgot the reason they were there. Instead, they wanted answers to a question no one dared to ask aloud. Were Keanu and Sandra truly together? Inside the hall, whispers grew stronger. One guest leaned to another. "This cannot be real." Another laughed nervously. "It is just for attention." But beneath those words, even the doubters could feel something different in the air. Sandra held herself with her usual kindness. She smiled at the staff, thanked the waiter who guided them to their table, and nodded politely to the photographers trying to capture every angle. Keanu stayed calm, his quiet strength radiating as always. He had no need for loud words or heavy gestures. His silence spoke more than anything else. Yet, behind those gentle smiles and calm steps, there was something deeper that no one in the crowd could see. Both of them carried stories, battles, and private struggles that had shaped them into who they were. And tonight was not just about appearing at a party. It was about showing the world something they had held close for too long. As the music played, Sandra found herself thinking of the past. She remembered the times she felt alone, the silent walks after long filming days, and the moments when the world praised her, yet her heart felt empty. Keanu had been there quietly, never forcing, never demanding, only offering presence when she needed it most. Keanu, too, carried memories. He had seen enough of life's pain, enough of sudden losses, enough of nights when fame meant nothing but silence. But through it all, he found in Sandra a person who respected him, not the actor, not the image, but the human behind it. She understood his silences, and he respected her strength. At the party, a famous director walked over and joked lightly, "You two know you've stolen the show, right?" Sandra smiled warmly, but Keanu's gentle laugh held a weight behind it. He knew the attention would not fade quickly. He knew whispers would turn into headlines by morning. Yet he also knew that tonight, they could not pretend anymore. Still, not everyone reacted with kindness. In the corner, a group of guests exchanged sharp words. Jealousy, doubt, and cynicism filled their voices. Some felt threatened by the bond Keanu and Sandra displayed. Others feared the truth might break old images they had built in their minds. But Keanu and Sandra stayed calm. They were not here to fight rumors. They were here to live with honesty. As the night went on, something unexpected happened. A young waiter, nervous and shy, accidentally dropped a tray of glasses near their table. The sound of breaking glass filled the room, and all eyes turned again. Some guests frowned in irritation. Others shook their heads in judgment. But before the waiter could bend down, embarrassed and shaking, Sandra stood up quickly. She knelt beside him, helping pick up the pieces with a soft smile. Keanu followed, kneeling too, his steady hands calming the young man who was on the verge of tears. In that simple moment, the hall shifted once more. It was no longer about glamour or gossip. It was about kindness. It was about two people who did not see themselves as above others, but equal, human, and humble. People whispered again, but now their tone was different. "Did you see that?" They didn't hesitate. That's real. And so the night that began with surprise slowly unfolded into something more meaningful. Keanu and Sandra's presence was not just shocking, it was inspiring. Their actions reminded everyone that respect and humility shine brighter than any spotlight. Yet deep down, both knew this was only the beginning. The party was just the first step in a journey that would test them in ways no one else could imagine. And though the world might not believe it now, soon the truth of their connection would face trials, conflict, and decisions that could change everything. The night ended with quiet music, and as Keanu and Sandra left hand in hand, the hall was filled with mixed emotions: admiration, disbelief, curiosity, and even envy. No one knew what was waiting ahead for them, but one thing was certain: this story had only just begun. The whispers grew louder. The morning after the party, the world had already changed. News, channels, websites, and social media were filled with one thing: pictures of Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock walking together, side by side, appearing closer than anyone had imagined. Some articles praised their quiet elegance, calling them the most genuine pair in Hollywood. Others turned to doubt, questioning whether it was only for attention, a stunt, or something more. Sandra woke early, sunlight spilling across her quiet room. She scrolled through her phone slowly, reading comments that shifted between warmth and judgment. She knew fame always carried both. Yet this time it felt heavier, because it wasn't just about her. It was about them, her and Keanu, standing together. She felt the weight of every word, every doubt, every expectation pressing into her. Keanu, across the city, sat in silence by his kitchen table with a cup of coffee. He had seen enough headlines in his life to know how quickly truth could be twisted. But this morning, as he read the words, he thought less about himself and more about Sandra. He knew how sensitive she was to judgment. She cared deeply about people, and sometimes she cared too much about what others thought. He worried the noise would reach her heart before he could calm it. By noon, the calls began. Directors, managers, reporters, and old friends wanted answers. Were they truly together? Was this serious? Why now? The pressure grew heavier with every unanswered call. That evening, Sandra called Keanu. Her voice was steady, but he could feel the storm behind it. "Keanu," she said softly, "I didn't think it would become this loud." Keanu listened, letting the silence between them hold meaning. Then he replied in his calm, deep tone, "The world will always talk, Sandra, but we know the truth. Let them speak. What matters is what we choose." His words gave her comfort, but still, a shadow of doubt lingered. She feared that too much attention could ruin the very bond that gave her peace. Days passed and invitations began arriving. Television hosts wanted interviews, magazines wanted covers, brands wanted them together in campaigns. Everywhere they turned, someone wanted to shape their story into something profitable. One night, they decided to meet quietly, away from cameras. They chose a small cafe tucked in a hidden corner of the city. It was nearly empty, with dim lights and quiet music. Sandra arrived first, wearing a simple coat and a scarf, hoping to remain unnoticed. Keanu came soon after, his steps steady, his presence calm. As they sat across from each other, Sandra leaned in. "Keanu, are we ready for this? The world won't let it go. They will search for cracks. They will question us. They will try to pull us apart." Keanu's eyes met hers. He didn't rush to answer. After a long pause, he said, "Sandra, I've lived long enough to know that love, friendship, and respect are tested most when others cannot understand them. I don't want to hide what is real, but I also don't want us to break under their weight." She nodded slowly, her eyes softening. "Then what do we do?" He reached across the table, not caring if someone noticed, and took her hand gently. "We live with honesty. We show kindness. We stay humble. We do not need to prove anything to anyone. Time will reveal what words cannot." In that quiet cafe, the noise of the world faded for a moment, but outside the storm was already building. Later that week, they attended another event, this time a charity gala for children. They wanted to shift the focus away from gossip and toward something meaningful. When they arrived, cameras flashed and whispers filled the air again. But instead of posing for endless photographs, they walked straight to the children seated in the hall. Keanu knelt down to speak to a shy boy holding a sketchbook. Sandra laughed warmly with a young girl showing her a handmade bracelet. The crowd of reporters watched, stunned by how naturally they ignored the noise around them. Yet not everyone was pleased. A sharp journalist pushed forward, interrupting the moment. "Keanu, Sandra, can you confirm if you are a couple? People deserve to know the truth." The hall grew silent. Children watched with wide eyes, unsure of what was happening. For a moment, it felt like the peace of the evening was about to break. Sandra looked at Keanu, her heart racing. He squeezed her hand gently, then turned to the journalist. His voice was steady but kind. "People don't deserve the truth if it comes at the cost of respect. Tonight is not about us. Tonight is about these children. If you want a story, write about their strength, not our lives." The room filled with quiet applause. Some smiled, touched by his words. Sandra's eyes grew misty, and she realized again why Keanu's presence always felt like calm in the middle of a storm. But deep inside, she also knew this was only the beginning. The world would not stop questioning. And soon, even greater challenges would test the strength of their bond. As they left the gala that night hand in hand, Sandra whispered softly, "No one will ever believe what we feel unless they see how we stand through what comes next." Keanu nodded. "Then we stand together." And so their journey moved forward, not just as two people, but as a symbol of resilience, humility, and kindness in a world that often forgot the meaning of both. The storm within, the days after the charity gala, carried both light and shadow. The applause Keanu and Sandra received for their humility spread across the internet. Many praised them for staying true to themselves, for shifting the focus from gossip to kindness. Yet at the same time, the curiosity only grew stronger. Reporters followed them more closely. Fans dissected every gesture, and gossip columns filled with speculation. Sandra sat by her living room window one quiet afternoon, looking out at the trees swaying gently in the breeze. Her phone buzzed endlessly with notifications. Some messages were from friends offering support, but others were filled with questions she did not know how to answer. She felt her chest tighten. She had been in the public eye for years, yet this time felt different. She feared that too much. Attention could destroy something fragile and real before it had the chance to grow. Keanu, meanwhile, spent his evenings walking through quiet streets, finding peace in simple routines. He was used to silence and carried it like a shield. But even he could feel the storm pressing closer, threatening to pull Sandra into a place where she might lose her calm. One evening, Sandra called him. Her voice carried a weight that made Keanu pause. "Keanu," she whispered, "I don't know if I can keep facing this every day. It feels like the world wants us to explain something that belongs only to us." Keanu listened quietly before replying. "Sandra, we cannot control the noise outside, but we can control how we carry ourselves. We can choose kindness even when the world is unkind. If we walk in truth, then no shadow can last. His words steadied her heart for a moment, but she still carried doubt. A week later, they agreed to attend a private dinner hosted by an old friend, a well-known director who wanted to celebrate his latest film. The dinner was small, only a few guests, but even in that quiet setting, their presence stirred whispers. As the night went on, a heated conversation rose at the table. One guest, a well-dressed producer with a sharp tongue, leaned forward and said loudly, "I don't believe in what you two are showing the world. It feels like a game. It feels staged." The words cut through the air like a blade. The table grew tense. Sandra's heart pounded. She wanted to speak, but her voice caught. Keanu placed his hand gently over hers beneath the table, grounding her. Then he looked up at the producer with calm eyes. "Truth doesn't need to be believed by everyone," he said softly. "Truth only needs to be lived by those who hold it." The room fell silent. The producer leaned back, unable to reply. Sandra exhaled slowly, realizing once again that Keanu's strength was not in loudness, but in quiet conviction. But that night, after the dinner ended and they walked together under the city lights, Sandra finally spoke what had been sitting in her heart. "Keanu, I fear the world will not stop until it breaks us. What if they succeed? What if we lose what we have?" Keanu stopped walking, turning to her. The street lamps cast a soft glow on his face. "Sandra, love and respect are not destroyed by outside voices. They are only destroyed when we stop believing in them. If we hold on, no one else can take this away." His words brought her comfort, yet the fear still lingered. In the days that followed, something unexpected happened. A video from the charity gala began to spread online. It showed the moment when Keanu had spoken to the journalist about respect and kindness. Millions watched it, and thousands commented. For many, it was more than gossip. It was a reminder of humility in a world that often chased only headlines. Messages poured in from people across the world. Some wrote, "Your words gave me strength." Others said, "You reminded me what respect looks like." For the first time, Sandra saw that their bond was not just under attack, it was also inspiring people. She realized that maybe the storm outside was not only a challenge, but also a chance to give light to those who needed it. Yet just as hope began to rise, a new challenge appeared. A tabloid published an article filled with lies. It claimed Keanu and Sandra were pretending for publicity, that they argued behind closed doors, that their smiles were masks. The article spread quickly, feeding the doubts of those already skeptical. Sandra read the words and felt her hands shake. Tears filled her eyes, not because she believed the lies, but because she feared others would. She called Keanu late that night, her voice trembling. "They're trying to destroy us, Keanu." He listened quietly, then spoke with steady calm. "Let them try. Truth does not change because of lies. We know what is real. We know who we are. Hold on to that, Sandra. Nothing else matters." She closed her eyes, letting his words sink in. In that moment, she realized that their journey was no longer just about themselves. It was about standing as proof that respect, humility, and kindness could survive even in the face of storms. But deep within both their hearts, they knew the hardest tests were still to come. The test of trust, the days after the false article, were heavy with tension. Sandra felt like every glance in public carried a silent question. Every whisper behind her back was about the story. She tried to brush it off, to remind herself that lies always traveled faster than truth. But deep inside, she worried. Keanu, however, carried himself with the same calm presence. He had seen this pattern before, rumors spreading, the world doubting, and people forgetting kindness for the sake of a headline. Yet this time it was different, because it was not only his name involved. Sandra mattered to him, and seeing her hurt weighed on his heart. One afternoon, Sandra sat in her home, scrolling through endless comments online. Her eyes stung with tears. People who had once praised her now spoke with cruelty, repeating the lies as if they were facts. She whispered softly to herself, "Why do they want to tear us apart?" Her phone rang. It was Keanu. She hesitated for a moment, wiping her eyes before answering. His voice was steady. "Sandra, don't let them inside your heart. The world may not believe us, but I do. And you must too." She wanted to believe his words, but doubt still pressed against her. Later that week, they decided to meet in person. They chose a quiet park just outside the city, far from flashing cameras. The sun was setting, painting the sky in soft gold and red. They walked side by side in silence, until finally, Sandra stopped. "Keanu," she said with a trembling voice, "what if this pressure breaks me? What if I'm not strong enough to keep standing in front of all this judgment?" He turned to her, his eyes gentle yet firm. "Strength is not about never falling, Sandra. Strength is about standing again even when you fall. You don't have to be unshaken. You only have to be real. I will stand with you when you feel weak. We do this together." Her eyes filled with tears, not from sadness, but from the weight of his words. She nodded slowly, realizing that resilience was not about perfection. It was about endurance. But as their bond grew stronger, a new problem began to rise, one they had not expected. A major film studio offered them roles in a project, but the condition was clear. They had to appear together as a couple in the film. The offer promised fame, money, and recognition, but it came with a hidden trap. Accepting it would make the world believe their bond was only for the screen, a performance, nothing more. Rejecting it could anger powerful people in the industry. Sandra sat with the script in her hands one night, the pages heavy in her lap. She sighed deeply. "Keanu, if we refuse, they will say we are afraid. If we accept, they will say it's all an act. How do we win?" Keanu leaned back, his voice calm as ever. "We don't need to win their game, Sandra. The moment we try to prove ourselves to them, we lose what is real. Our truth is not for sale. We live it, not perform it." She looked at him, searching his face for any sign of doubt, but found none. Still, the pressure grew. Managers called, friends gave advice, and the industry buzzed with expectation. Everywhere they turned, the question followed: will they accept the film? In the middle of this storm, an old friend reached out to Sandra. It was a woman she had known for years, someone who had always been supportive. But this time, her words cut deep. "Sandra," she said, "be careful. I've seen people destroyed by chasing something the world doesn't want them to have. Maybe this bond with Keanu is too heavy to carry." Sandra hung up the phone, her heart torn. Doubt crept in again. Was her friend right? Was this bond destined to collapse under the world's weight? The next day, she met Keanu again, her voice unsteady. "Keanu, what if they are right? What if we are risking everything for something that cannot last?" He paused, looking at her with calm eyes that held both pain and patience. "Sandra, everything in life is a risk. Love is a risk. Respect is a risk. Kindness is a risk. But if we let fear decide for us, we will never know what could have been true." She closed her eyes, letting the silence wash over her. She realized he was right. To live in fear was to never truly live at all. They rejected the film offer. It caused a wave of backlash. Some called them foolish. Others accused them of wasting an opportunity. Headlines screamed that they were unprofessional, stubborn, or simply playing a game. But for Keanu and Sandra, the decision brought peace. They had chosen truth over illusion. They had chosen respect over approval. Still, the storm outside was far from over. New rumors began to spread, darker than before. Whispers claimed betrayal, secrets, and even hidden conflicts between them, and, though their hearts held firm, both knew that the hardest battles were no longer just with the world. They would soon face challenges that would test their trust in each other more deeply than ever before. Cracks in the silence. The rejection of the film offer brought peace for only a moment. Behind closed doors, Keanu and Sandra felt proud of their choice, but outside, the world responded with sharp voices. Newspapers called them reckless. Critics said they feared competition, and some even claimed their bond would fade because of the pressure. Sandra tried to ignore it, but the words followed her everywhere. Each interview request she refused became another headline. Each event she skipped became another rumor. One morning, while sipping coffee on her balcony, she overheard her neighbors whispering about her. It was not cruel, but it still stung. "Maybe it's just for attention," one voice said softly. "No," another replied. "She looks too real when she's with him." Sandra set her cup down, her heart heavy. She wanted to live simply, quietly, but fame had never allowed that. Now, with Keanu by her side, the noise seemed louder than ever. Keanu, meanwhile, carried the weight differently. He moved with the same calm presence. But silence does not mean absence of pain. At night, when the world was quiet, he often sat alone, thinking of all the ways the pressure might hurt Sandra. He wished he could shield her completely. But he knew she had to walk her own path of resilience. Their bond, though strong, began to feel the tremors of doubt. One evening, after a long day filled with calls and rumors, they sat in Sandra's living room. The lights were dim, the silence between them heavy. Sandra finally spoke, her voice trembling. "Keanu, I don't know how long I can do this. I feel like we're fighting the whole world every single day. Sometimes I wonder if it would be easier to just step back." Her words pierced him, though. He showed no anger. He looked at her calmly, his voice soft but firm. "Sandra, easier is not always better. The world wants to break us because it cannot understand us. But if we walk away, we let them win." Tears filled her eyes. "But what if we break ourselves first?" The room grew quiet. The honesty of her words cut deeper than any headline. In the following days, they saw less of each other, not because they stopped caring, but because they needed space to breathe. Sandra threw herself into her work, filming long hours, trying to escape the noise. Keanu retreated into his silence, riding his motorcycle through quiet roads, searching for clarity in the wind and the open sky. But distance only made the whispers louder. Tabloids began publishing stories of a rift between them. Photos of Sandra alone at events, pictures of Keanu riding by himself, all painted the image of separation. One night, Sandra read a headline that claimed Keanu had been seen with another woman. The article was filled with lies, but the pictures were real. Just him speaking to a colleague outside a studio. Still, her chest tightened. Doubt crept in, not because she didn't trust him, but because the world had planted seeds of fear. She picked up the phone, her hands shaking, and called him. When he answered, his calm voice only made her tears fall faster. "Keanu," she whispered, "tell me this isn't breaking us apart." He was silent for a long moment before replying. "Sandra, don't let their lies destroy what we have. I spoke to a friend, nothing more. But even if the world twists it, I will not change. My respect for you is not weak." Her tears slowed. She wanted to believe, and deep inside she did. But the fear still lingered. A few days later, fate forced them back together. They were both invited to a private charity dinner, and neither could refuse. The room was filled with quiet music and warm lights, but as soon as they walked in, all eyes turned to them. Whispers filled the air once again. They sat side by side, but the space between them felt heavy. People noticed, and soon the questions began. Are they drifting apart? Is the truth finally coming out? Sandra lowered her eyes, her heart breaking at the thought that strangers could so easily shape their story. Keanu, noticing her pain, gently reached for her hand beneath the table. She looked up, and in his calm gaze she found what words could not give. Reassurance. Strength. After the dinner, they walked outside together, the night air cool against their faces. Sandra finally spoke. Keanu, I'm afraid. Not of us, but of what they can turn us into. I don't want to lose what makes us real. He stopped walking, turning to face her fully. Sandra, we don't fight against the world by being louder. We fight by being true. As long as you hold my hand, no storm can separate us. She looked at him, her tears glistening in the moonlight. Slowly, she nodded. Then I will hold on. But deep within both their hearts, they knew the storm was far from over. The world would not stop testing them. And soon, the hardest test of all would not come from rumors or lies, but from a choice they would have to make together. The choice they could not escape. The days after the charity dinner carried a strange quiet. Sandra and Keanu walked closer again, their bond slowly healing from the doubts that had almost torn it apart. But even as they shared laughter and soft moments, they both knew deep inside that something bigger was coming. Rumors had become background noise. The tabloids never stopped, but they had grown used to the constant waves. Yet one evening, Sandra received a call that shifted everything. It was her manager, his voice urgent. Sandra, he said, there's a major project being announced. It's a global campaign about resilience and human values. They want you and Keanu to be the faces of it. The money is huge, but more than that, it will put you both under the biggest spotlight of your lives. Sandra froze. She understood the weight of those words. It was more than a project. It was a stage where the entire world would watch them together. She ended the call, her hands trembling. Later that night, she told Keanu about it. They sat in his quiet home, the soft glow of a single lamp filling the room. Sandra's voice carried both hope and fear. This could change everything, Keanu. It could silence the doubts, show people who we really are. But it could also put us in a cage where every step is judged. Keanu leaned back in his chair, his expression calm. Sandra, we have always said our truth is not for sale. But maybe this is not about selling. It is about showing. The question is not if the world is ready to see us. The question is if we are ready to stand no matter what follows. His words sat heavy in the air. Days passed, and the pressure grew. Their managers called. Friends offered advice, and headlines speculated if they would finally step into the light. Some voices encouraged them. Others warned that too much exposure would burn what they had. In the middle of this storm, Sandra found herself facing her deepest fear. What if the world's weight became too much for Keanu? What if she lost the man who had been her calm, her strength, her anchor? One evening, she confronted him directly. They walked by the ocean, waves crashing softly against the shore. Sandra stopped, her eyes fixed on the horizon. Keanu, she said softly, I need to know if you want this. Not for the world, not for me, but for yourself. I don't want to drag you into something that will steal your peace. He looked at her, the sea breeze moving through his hair, his voice low but steady. Sandra, my peace does not come from hiding. My peace comes from living with honesty. If this is the path, then I will walk it, but only if you walk with me. Tears touched her eyes, but this time, they were not from fear. They were from the weight of trust. She nodded, whispering. Then we walked together. They agreed to accept the project, but the moment the news broke, the storm became a hurricane. The world exploded with opinions. Some praised them, calling them symbols of resilience. Others doubted, claiming it was all strategy. The campaign demanded travel, speeches, and public appearances across the globe. Suddenly, their quiet moments grew rare. Instead of private dinners, they were on stages. Instead of silent walks, they were under bright lights. And though their bond was strong, the pressure was real. One night, after a long day of endless interviews, Sandra sat in her hotel room, exhausted. She looked at Keanu, who was as calm as ever, but she saw the quiet fatigue in his eyes. "Keanu," she whispered, "what if this project takes away the very thing we tried to protect? Our peace." He walked over, sitting beside her, his voice soft but sure. "Sandra, peace is not about the noise outside. Peace is about the heart inside. As long as we choose kindness, as long as we respect each other, no stage can take that away." His words comforted her, but she knew the road ahead would not be simple. The campaign had just begun, and the demands would only grow. Still, they had made their choice. They would not hide. They would not bow to lies. They would face the world openly, knowing it would test them again and again. And as they stood together under the flashing lights of their first global event, hands gently linked, Sandra whispered, "No one believed it then, and maybe some will never believe it now. But we will show them not with words, but with how we live." Keanu smiled faintly, replying, "Truth is lived, not argued." And so, they stepped into the brightest stage of their lives, carrying not only their bond, but the hope that respect, humility, and kindness could still shine in a world that often forgot its meaning. Yet in the shadows beyond the lights, new challenges were already waiting. Challenges that would test not just their love, but their very resilience as human beings. Standing in the light, the campaign grew larger with each passing week. Billboards of Keanu and Sandra appeared in cities across the world. Their faces shone on screens in airports, train stations, and crowded streets. Everywhere they went, people looked at them with curiosity, admiration, or doubt. For some, they became symbols of respect and kindness. For others, they were targets of criticism and suspicion. The weight of both love and judgment pressed heavily on their shoulders. Sandra felt it most during the nights when the lights went off and silence returned. She would lie awake, her thoughts circling endlessly. Are we really strong enough for this? Or are we just pretending until something cracks? Keanu, sitting beside her in those quiet nights, always spoke softly, his calm voice grounding her. "Sandra, strength is not about never breaking. It is about holding on to what matters when the world tries to take it away." But soon, their greatest test arrived. During one of their biggest events, where they were to speak about resilience in front of thousands, a journalist stood up and asked a piercing question. His words carried the weight of every doubt the world had thrown at them. "Keanu, Sandra," he said loudly, "many still believe this is nothing more than an act. If it is real, prove it. What can you show us that words and appearances cannot?" The crowd fell silent. Cameras zoomed in. Every face in the audience leaned forward, waiting for the answer. Sandra's heart raced. She looked at Keanu, fear flashing in her eyes. This was the very moment she had always dreaded, that their truth would be measured by others. Keanu took a slow breath, his calm presence filling the stage. He turned to Sandra first, gently holding her hand, then looked back at the crowd. "Truth does not live in performances," he said softly. "It lives in the choices we make when no one is watching. You may not see the nights when Sandra doubts herself, and I remind her of her strength. You may not see the moments when I fall silent, and she fills the silence with kindness. You may not see how we lift each other when the world tries to push us down, but we see it, and that is enough." His words filled the hall with a deep, unexpected silence. Then, slowly, applause began. It grew louder and louder until the entire room was standing. Sandra's eyes filled with tears. She realized then that the world could never truly measure what was between them. But what mattered was that they stood firm, side by side, not bending to fear or lies. After the event, as they stepped off the stage, Sandra turned to Keanu, her voice trembling but steady. "You saved us tonight. Not with proof, but with truth." Keanu smiled faintly. "I didn't save us, Sandra. We saved each other." In the weeks that followed, something shifted. The noise did not vanish. Rumors and doubts never truly ended. But the tone changed. More and more people began to see them not as gossip, but as examples. Their humility, their calm, and their quiet resilience spoke louder than any headline. Letters arrived from strangers across the world. A single mother wrote, "Your story gave me hope when I thought I couldn't stand anymore." A young man shared, "You reminded me that kindness matters, even when the world doesn't believe in it." For Sandra and Keanu, those messages meant more than applause or fame. They realized their bond had become more than just theirs. It had become a light for others who had forgotten what respect and humility looked like. One evening, after months of traveling and speaking, they finally sat together in a quiet garden, away from lights and cameras. The air was calm, and the stars glimmered above them. Sandra leaned into Keanu, her voice soft. "When this all began, I was afraid we would be broken by the world. But now, I see that every storm only made us stronger." Keanu looked at her with the same steady calm that had carried them through everything. "Storms do not destroy what is real, Sandra. They only show its strength." They sat in silence then, no words needed, because the journey had already spoken for them. No one had believed it at first. Many still doubted. But in the end, it did not matter. What mattered was that they had walked together through fear, through whispers, through storms, and had come out not just as a couple, but as proof that kindness, humility, and resilience could stand in any light. And for the rest of their days, no matter what the world said, they knew one truth would never change. Respect and love, when held with honesty, could never be broken.